This series of videos introduces the 38 chapters of the Routledge Handbook of Environmental Movements. It's a project of the Social Change Lab, and we gratefully acknowledge the support of the Mary Lee Bequest for the work of our team.
Good. Hi, everyone. My name is Winifred Lewis, and I'm a professor of social psychology at the University of Queensland.
My name is Fengshi Wu. I'm the Associate Professor of Political Science and International Relations at the University of New South Wales in Sydney. And I'm talking to you today from the Bidjigal People's Land.
All right, and I'm Yunika Mutiara. I'm a PhD student in the University of Queensland, Brisbane.
That's right, and we're all online, as you guys would have gathered. I'm speaking to you from Brisbane, the home of the Turrbal and Yagara people here. Thanks for the prompt to acknowledge country. So what we're doing in these video series is making introductory videos for each of the chapters in the Routledge Handbook of Environmental Movements. And today we're all three here to talk about Chapter 6, Environmental Movements in Asia, Divergent Relationship with Political Liberalization.
Thank you.
Hi, Fengshi. Could you please tell us more about what is the definition of the political liberalization and what's the difference with the democratization? If you could please tell us more about that. Thanks.
Thank you for this great opening question. And I think everyone probably who's not from the discipline of political science will have a question like that. I also spent quite a lot of time to nail down to this particular concept. And it is important to differentiate it from democratization, which is probably much more commonly known to anyone who's concerned of current affairs. So contrasting these two terms, democratization is much more, in a way, much better defined because of the milestones, specific milestones, and specific institutional accomplishments, in a sense. For a country to complete the process of democratization, will have to go through a process called twice of regime power change. That either it's parliamentary or presidential, doesn't matter. But the country has to go through peaceful sort of the participatory process to change their leadership. And for political liberalization, it's much less institutionally defined. There's some overlap, indicates the opening up of political space, more opportunities for individual citizens to take a part in politics, in all different kinds of political processes. But political liberalization can happen without democratization.
And that's a point you make in the chapter repeatedly, that in some cases, a country can be democratic in name and not democratic in character because one party will retain control. And in other cases, there may be two countries that are non-democratic, one of which allows robust participation by ordinary people in civil society, and one which does not. And so that's liberalization. That's the participation of people in the society, including in environmental movements. And you put forward the idea that this is really essential but not sufficient for environmental movements to succeed. Tell us about that.
Thank you. And also thank you for the additional information on that, because I made an argument that this is critical to understand the context in Asia, which very often was opening up, but not necessarily hitting the specific democratization bars.
Yeah.
So, and another major thing is that this research examines co-evolution, not just the environmental movement, not just the political change, but the relationship, the dynamism between the two. And again, to some of us, the assumption is that once you have political opening up, political liberalization, welcoming participation in public debates, in policy processes, implementation. Once you have that, you automatically, as if you will have better participation in the environmental field and possibly more incidents, occurrence of movements. So what we empirically observe is that the co-evolution is not linear, is not straightforward. It could take different turns. And coupled with domestic complications, democratic, political decentralization, political liberalization could introduce a lot of unexpected changes in the society, which might be counterproductive to the broad type of environmental movements, not narrowly defined and not in my backyard, very much specific grievance-driven type of
I think that
what I'm talking a broad, involving whole society type of progressive environmental movements. Surprisingly, there can be odd moments.
I thought if we, in a way, we're starting the recording by going through the conclusion section of your chapter, because I think that's the key takeaway points that some people might want to get to. And I thought it was really rich and important, the chapter, in drawing out the idea that economic development being such a push and pull factor in the Asian history of the countries that you specify, but more broadly the region in the last 50, 60 years, that has been something that sometimes through democracy has become even more of a force. And so the liberalization process has not necessarily translated into greater environmental outcomes, in part because the liberalization has unleashed the narrative and the collective will to develop and to reduce poverty as a top priority. Can you respond to that? Is that fair?
Yes. The economic factor, or the so-called development drive, is one of major explanation I have put forward. At the same time, also, I want to use this example. There are a lot more of such kind of factors having double, sort of sided impact.
That's right.
The economic changes probably unleashed a lot of political demands, which contribute to the overall political liberalization. But at the same time, as you just mentioned, that the reforms happening in the economic realms in a way that urges grabbing of natural resources, jumping into unpredictable global markets of resources, and reduce regulatory monitoring, and encouraging also, in a way, again, this is complicated by lots of examples from Asia, is the deeply rooted identity-based politics, which in its own name, requires a lot of understanding, and many of us are very sympathetic to that. But sort of the marriage between identity politics and natural resource-driven sort of neoliberal economic reform ends up to very bitter clash at the local level and a very unfriendly outcome in terms of environment.
That's right. And certainly one thing I took from your chapter and from many other chapters is that the neoliberalism has often been at the expense of the environment as well. And you talk about the malign impact of foreign corporations, which often act in partnership with governments, whether through corruption, but also more, even more commonly, perhaps through ties among the elites, where they impose their interests to the expense of local voices and the local environment and the health of people and environments locally. So there's really been a kind of a colonial era exploitation of the environment at the expense of locals, continuing into the present neoliberal form, where multinational corporations from abroad put pressure on governments to ignore local needs. Have I simplified things too much? That's what I took.
what you said is correct. I would only add that sometimes also these economic interest groups are also local or national, or maybe big cities out there coming to rural communities. So, and also sort of state-led big companies trying to, have a jump start at the global level, which again is very prevalent phenomenon among the, big aspiring developing countries, that there's a big merge of effort of the national government with some entrepreneurship, economic entrepreneurship, try to push the national brand to the global level, try to, squeeze themselves into the global market of so on. So at the expense of very remote and rural communities' environmental health.
That's a really important point. I want to open up the floor to you, Unica. Did you have any questions about the big picture themes of the chapter at this stage?
No, maybe like the last questions, like overall, like how far do you think the countries like in Asia, because particularly right in Asia, like we need to catch up with the Western countries, like in regards to these environmental movements?
Oh,
this is actually a difficult question, and I do want to say that no one is in a position to tell anyone, especially for environment. It's such a field so close to everyday life. In a way, by being, sort of a lot of times doing the research with the community NGOs for the past 20 years. And within each country, I think there will be very diverse conversations. Why do we protect the river? For whose sake? In whose name? For what purposes? Right? Communities might have very different take, and communities can be wrong sometimes, or at least I hope a lot of things can be opened up for broader discussions. So I want to point out that different from, let's say, the European and Northern American experience is that a lot of more Asian, African, Latin American countries in the long journey to have a sustainable future, they're caught in more complex situations. They're fighting not just against excessive demand for economic growth. They're caught in, it's oversimplified, but the pursuit of democracy, the pursuit of, let's not say wealth, but well-being, and genuine pursuit of a sustainable future. They are interested in that, but the task is way more compound and complex than, let's say, early on, because when there was very little resistance or little cost or political cost if you lose a lake or cut off a piece of forest. The political cost wasn't there, but now suddenly there's political cost. Some of the political costs are coming from really above. The world has decided about this. So it's complicated. It's not straightforward. And that's when, the point that political opening up is not sufficient. It's one of the major requirements, but it's not sufficient to truly have a effective global environmental movement that would lead to policy outcomes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Unica. I think I'm going to draw a line here at the moment. This will be the end of the global section, and we might even have a part 1 and part 2.
For those of you watching, be sure to subscribe and follow us at Social Change UQ, and check out our website for more videos.